So the important thing to remember about immune responses is it's regulation that's important, not just kickstarting it. So the end of the affair. So once the immune system is activated, as I've said, generation and inflammation is generated, and that inflammatory response is needed to help recruit more cells to the site of the infection and also necessary for healing and fighting off the invaders. If the response is too strong or prolonged, it can lead to damage to the individual, the chronic inflammation, or even to autoimmunity where the body mistakenly attacks its own tissues. The Tregs are the ones that help to dampen down the immune response once the infection is under control. And that's really one of the messages we missed during COVID, is that many people who were in ICU, who were in difficulty, it wasn't the virus that was the problem. The virus was already under control. It was the immune system gone rogue. It hadn't been switched off, and it was generating more and more and more inflammation, which was damaging tissues. So this is just a study. If you want to read a review article about how the immune system terminates the immune response, it goes on to talk about inflammation as an active process, and it's needed to be resolved if we're going to fight active processes like cytokine storms, multi-organ failure, acute respiratory distress syndrome, all of which we were hearing as horrible warning signs for people who were ill with COVID. So you have to have a termination to provide autoimmunity. Now, here's one very useful marker in our blood tests that I don't think is utilized sufficiently, that can tell you whether the immune system is active, whether it's resolving, the infection is under control and it's calming down, or whether it's ongoing and potentially creating autoimmunity. And that is the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio. In the regular blood tests, we get neutrophils and lymphocyte counts, and they can be normal, but the ratio of one to the other may not. Remember, the neutrophil is looking at our innate immune response, and lymphocytes looking more at acquired immunity. So this is a study looking at the coronavirus in its early stage, so somebody who just acquired the infection. They says the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio is a predictive factor for early stage prediction of patients who are likely to develop critical illness. And they say and state quite categorically, if you're over 50 and your neutrophil lymphocyte ratio is 3.13 or more, that predicts those people are going to go on to develop a critical illness and should have rapid access to intensive care. Now, the normal NLR is between 1 and 2. So this can tell you if you had a very active inflammation going on or active infection, it might be 6, and you'd see it come down as the infection resolved. If it stayed up, that's a bad sign. So we need nutrition to keep the immune system from malfunctioning. So first of all, we're going to look at vitamin D. And vitamin D is probably the most critical of the nutrients, but it doesn't work alone, as we'll see. So first of all, vitamin D is critical for innate immunity. It affects how cells divide. It's needed for cells to divide. And it also is needed for another function of cells, and that is apoptosis. Apoptosis is a programmed self-suicide of cells. Perhaps they're virally infected, perhaps they are going on to become cancer cells, and the body automatically deletes them. But it depends on vitamin D to do that. So the effect of vitamin D is cell-specific. In healthy cells, vitamin D helps the healthy cells divide and produce more and more. Think about the neutrophils. And in cancer cells, vitamin D is needed to delete those cells, to get rid of potentially cancer cells and stop the progression. So this is a review of the effect of vitamin D on immune-related disorders. So it says that vitamin D plays a complex role in numerous biochemical pathways involved in immunity. It's needed to produce those pattern recognition receptors, and it's also needed to produce natural antimicrobials that the body can make itself, the immune system makes itself. And without adequate vitamin D, there is no adequate wound healing and the dampening down of the inflammatory response to infection. So I usually like to give you review articles because that can really bring together a lot of current information, particularly when they're current, like this one is. So while vitamin D leads to the stimulation of innate immune responses, it causes suppression of the acquired immune responses, and long-term, it prevents ongoing inflammation and autoimmunity. So it's all about balance, basically. If we look at T cells again, they can be further divided into two different groups, Th1 cells and Th2 cells. The Th1 fight the viruses and the bacteria. They produce inflammation, but excessive activity will cause uncontrolled tissue damage. The Th2, on the other hand, upregulate the B cell activity and make more antibodies. So excessive Th2, though, counteracts the antimicrobial of the Th1. So they are balancing each other out. An optimal immune response requires a well-balanced Th1, Th2 system.